Today, I'm here with the lead singer and songwriter of the Harvest Thieves. His name is Cory Reinisch, and the new album he wrote is called As the Sparks Fly Upward. The first song you just heard is called Birth of a Salesman. And Cory, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, Trevor. It's our first cold spell down here in Austin for the fall season. So it's nice and cold and rainy outside, and we are very happy about that.
Yeah, yeah, 2 days ago we had 80 something degree temperatures, and then the day after we were in the mid 50s. So that
Yeah,
was quite an experience.
it was
Um,
sort of that way here too. Yeah.
Back to the music. Tell me about what makes American society so susceptible to the forces at play in Birth of a Salesman and to hucksters in general.
I've I've thought a lot about that, and I have at many points in my life. Um, I don't know. I the When I was writing that song, I was sort of thinking about that. I think it's the sixth or seventh chapter in Grapes of Wrath, where he's talking about the used car salesman, and that whole chapter is just genius. It's real short. It's almost like a little vignette type of thing. But that's a true American trope, and it always has been with us, and we see it nowadays so blatantly in our mainstream society. And I've always been fascinated by that. So I guess to answer your question, what makes us susceptible to that? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the system that we've agreed upon. I think capitalism, in particular late stage capitalism, gives a quite the breeding ground for the huckster and the snake oil salesman. Um, but we've always had those characters and those types in American society from the get go, and I'm not so interested in the figure himself or herself or themselves, the group. I'm more interested in our inability to parse out bullshit. I think that's what fascinates me more than anything, because I guess had a I've had a very strong instinct. It's kind of like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, I've always had that in my life, and um, when people don't have that, or they don't question what they're seeing. I mean, you take a Trump figure for example, and he's one of many, but he's an obvious one. So I just there's not a fiber in my being that doesn't see it, how much this is all just bullshit. It's just a sales game. So he might have even been a main inspiration for that song. But I'm fascinated by our inability to parse out what's true and what's not. And even more fascinating to me is when this figure I'm following, or this ideology that I'm falling for, actually is detrimental to me, when I'm being convinced that it's not, but it actually is detrimental. It's working against my best interest. And I guess in some way, the snake oil salesman figure has always been that way. But yeah, I definitely was looking at it from that angle when writing that song. And it was I'm not the first artist to do this, to use the devil as a metaphor in a song, but I think I think that we let the devil in the door, and now we don't know what to do with him. So
Yeah, we definitely seem to be struggling with the devil who found his way down an escalator into our living rooms. And yeah, if we're talking about letting the devil in the door, the next song I'm going to get to is called Empire Fall. And the devil sort of knocked his way into the door, uh, broke some windows, shoved some police officers over. Um, and what I found really remarkable about the song you wrote is that you're talking about January 6th, but at its core, it's a song about love. So, how did you how did you write a January 6th love song? And what about that day led you to think about loved ones?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. I think the easiest answer for me is because I was currently in love with someone. So um, that day is significant for me for many ways, but it's just this accumulation of bullshit for years and years and years, almost half a decade. And, of course that happened. I mean, of course that happened. We saw it coming from a mile away. Maybe we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but we knew something like that was going to happen. And if you didn't know something like that was going to happen, then you just weren't paying attention, or you weren't able to frame effectively what was going on in our society. So that the significance of that day was not shocking to me. Everybody clutched their pearls and kind of shrieked in horror, and there were some horrific things that happened that day. Don't get me wrong, I'm not belittling that, but it was going to happen. Something like that was going to happen, and I guess the love aspect of that song was just sort of a resignation to being tired of it all, and just saying, it feels like there's not much we can do to stop this tidal wave of horse shit. And we're all so sick of it. I mean, even one of the lines in there is, I feel so weary. I can't remember the line off the top of my head, but maybe you are too. Um, it was a resignation to just say, yes, this is happening. It feels like it's going to continue to happen, but at the end of all this, at least I still have you in my life. So I thought that was a nice sentiment. It felt like one that had been missing a lot just in our cultural purview for a while. So I don't know. I felt like there was a balance there, that there was a little bit of light and some darkness, and I wanted to write about it.
So, not wanting to kneel for a king is a bit of the message in that song. Um, I
It
would
is.
imagine that if you asked anyone in Texas whether or not they would want to kneel for a king, you would get nearly 100% say, "Oh, hell no." So, why is it? Or what do you think is going on? Do you think that the red majority down there understands that they're voting for someone who wants to be king?
I think at first they didn't understand that. I think that when he came along, he was giving voice to people who felt like they had no voice, whether that was true or not. That's debatable in my mind, but that's the reality. And I've lived here my entire life, and I've grown up in rural Texas, and I've never not lived in Texas. So I feel like I have a bit of an authority here to speak on this matter. Uh, I truly believe it was with the best of intentions that support was thrown behind this movement at first, because I believe it came out of frustration. And there's a lot of people in our society who are frustrated, and it has nothing to do with where you fall on the political spectrum. However, over time, these well-meaning and well-intended people, I think there started to be a darkness that we've all seen, and bad behavior and uh, petulance, that started peeking its way through pretty quick. It wasn't a movement about change. It started to be sort of a vengeance ideology, or at least that's how I saw it. And some of these well intentions started to turn dark, and it gave license to maybe parade some of the darker aspects of our characters and our value systems. And I among many had a big problem with that. So when I say I won't kneel for a king, that's my way of saying that I vehemently deny your ideology and do not agree with it. And I think, to answer your question as far as why it would seem a group of people here in this region who value their independent thought and their liberties and their freedoms, so to speak, don't understand that they're putting their support behind someone who does not have their best interest in mind. I think it's because they're too far gone. And that's not a rosy thought, and it's not a comforting one either. But this movement and this ideology has gone beyond one man now, and now it's just sort of just anger and revenge and vengeance, and what's good for me is mine, and what's good for you is not good for me, so there is no compromise. There's a real darkness to it, and I could see it coming on early on. I mean, that's why I didn't throw my support behind it. But yeah, it's an odd thing to see people throw support behind something that's quite obviously doing them a detriment.
Well, let's hear Empire Falls, and we'll be right back.